In the news tonight, Deputy Commissioner of Police tenders resignation. Ministry clarifies what constitutes being fully vaccinated. And new COVID variants discovered around the world.
From the studios of FBC Suva, Edwin Nunn.
Bulawanaka, Fiji. Deputy Commissioner of Police Rusiate Tundravu has tendered his resignation to the Commissioner of Police Brigadier General Sitiveni Ngilio. Tundravu acted as Commissioner of Police over a 12-month period while Commissioner Ngilio was away overseas for studies supported by the United Kingdom government. The Fiji Police Force says during the completion of the handing over of duties to the Commissioner, the Deputy Commissioner has decided to tender his resignation. And Apanisa Wanganandovu joins us live now. Apanisa, what are some of the highlights of Tundravu's career?
Edwin, this marks the end of Tundravu's 39 years of service, having reached the office of the Deputy Commissioner upon his retirement. Tundravu held the post of Acting Commissioner of Police in the past 12 months in the absence of Compol Sitiveni Ngilio, who was away for study in the United Kingdom. His leadership was also instrumental in the COVID-19 response effort in the past year in terms of manning checkpoints and assisting the Ministry of Health in the COVID-19 effort to battle the virus. The outgoing Deputy Police Commissioner in the past year also ensured that police officers were well trained on how to better respond to reports of domestic violence while working closely with the Fiji Women Crisis Center. Tundravu also held the position of Police Chief of Operation prior to becoming the Deputy Commissioner of Police in August of 2018. It is no doubt that Tundravu is a fighter in the war against illegal drugs. During his term, he was able to dialogue with community leaders, church leaders, as well as sporting organizations condemning the use of illegal drugs in the country. The man led several drug raids in Kandabu and other main hotspots last year in the absence of the Commissioner of Police. Tundravu on several occasions has relieved some officers from their duties for failure to comply or to carry out their works diligently. Commissioner of Police Brigadier General Sitiveni Ngilio had thanked the outgoing Deputy Commissioner for his services and wished him well in his future endeavors. Edwin.
Naka Panisa. 3 people died less than 2 weeks after receiving their second jab of the COVID-19 vaccine. Permanent Secretary for Health Dr. James Fong says people need at least 2 weeks after the second dose to be considered fully vaccinated. Lina Rees reports the 3 people were among the 13 COVID deaths reported by the ministry yesterday.
2 of these individuals were infected with the virus before they received their second jab. The third patient got sick with COVID-19 and died within 2 weeks of the second dose.
We know from the timeline of when their symptoms developed that 2 of these individuals were infected with the virus before they got their second dose of the vaccine. In fact, it's very likely that they got it while they were sick. We must understand that there is a difference between cure and prevention. The vaccine is not a cure for COVID-19, which means it will not help if you get vaccinated when you're already infected or sick with the virus.
Health officials are again urging those who are still unsure to get their COVID-19 vaccinations as the vaccines reduce severe disease, hospitalization and death.
Encouraging all Fijians that while we have these vaccines in Fiji and that's accessible to you, get it earlier than later, because earlier you get it, it gives you a lot more time for that immune system to build up.
Meanwhile, Dr. Fong has stressed that no one in Fiji has died from COVID-19 after they have been fully vaccinated against the virus. Lina Rees, FBC News.
The Health Ministry is reviewing the purpose and use of the Lami to Nosuri containment border entirely. Permanent Secretary for Health Dr. James Fong says any adjustment to the zone will depend on the number of vaccines administered within the communities. Kritika Kumar reports.
The Ministry of Health says there are communities that will see higher flows of traffic once the containment zone border is lifted.
Our health teams will be imminently surveying these areas to confirm what percentage of these communities have been vaccinated before we consider lifting the border.
He adds if there is not sufficient vaccine coverage, they are deploying the stock of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. The ministry is also considering a revision to the curfew hours, which also hinges on vaccine coverage.
We do not have a specific date for you today as to when the border will be lifted or when curfew will change.
The head of health protection says every technical factor shows the risk of transmission is extremely high across Viti Levu.
We are using other metrics, other measures to measure how much the outbreak is, where the outbreak is currently.
The ministry adds that the travel from Viti Levu to the north and to the maritime islands remains highly regulated with pre-departure and quarantine protocols in place. Kritika Kumar, FBC News.
Meanwhile, despite more Fijians becoming vaccinated, the ministry is still worried about services becoming overwhelmed. Head of Health Protection, Dr. Alisha Saukhan, says there are more people becoming severely ill and the majority aren't fully vaccinated. She adds those who believe they are protecting their individual rights should consider the impact of their decisions on others. There are currently 386 people in hospital isolation and 74 of them are in severe or critical condition.
The more people we have unvaccinated in the population, the worse the impact on our health system. Just like what is happening in other countries in the world, their ICUs, their hospital is filling up with people that are not vaccinated and are very, very sick.
Our ultimate goal remains for us to protect our friends, our family and colleagues from becoming seriously ill or dying from this virus. And the vaccines are the best way to do that.
The Health Ministry has so far managed to balance care for severely ill COVID patients without critical services to others being affected. However, this could change if more people don't become vaccinated.
So what happens to the people who are vaccinated but get other diseases, or they get into car accidents? What happens if they need a ventilator? Because there are so many people who are unvaccinated and get very sick, they fill up our hospitals.
As of last night, 4 COVID patients are on ventilators and about 30 need oxygen supplement. The World Health Organization has raised concerns on new COVID variants identified around the world. While Fiji has not been affected, the WHO says the virus continues to evolve since it began in late 2019. Christiana Uluwai reports.
The coronavirus have mutated so fast since the Alpha variant was detected 2 years ago, and this is a cause of concern for WHO.
There will be more variants. The virus is evolving. It continues to evolve every day. We have 4 variants of concern that we are tracking. There are 4 variants of interest that we are tracking, and many more alerts that we have on our radar.
WHO says it is also working to determine whether the current therapeutics will be able to work against these developing new variants. It adds that the efficacy of the COVID treatments will always be an ongoing trial for the WHO as long as the pandemic lingers on.
Try to gather information on whether or not the treatments we are using now or the treatments we are evaluating in the trial lose their effectiveness because of the variants. So far we have no evidence to ascertain whether or not that is the case.
Fiji, on the other hand, is working towards controlling and eliminating the current Delta variant that is grappling the nation.
Please put on your mask. Please practice a public health safe measures. Please be fully vaccinated as quickly as possible.
The WHO confirms that several other COVID treatments are on trial and results are expected next month. Christiana Uluwai, FBC News.
Now to our latest COVID-19 update. Fiji recorded 568 new infections for the period ending 8 a.m. yesterday. 306 cases are from the Central Division and 262 from the West. The Health Ministry also recorded 13 new deaths. 7 are from the West and 6 from the Central Division. Fiji has recorded 38,344 cases since April this year. There are now 24,299 active cases in isolation with 13,598 recoveries in total. The COVID-19 death toll stands at 340. The vaccination campaign continues. As of yesterday, 528,926 people, or 90.2% of the population, have received their first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. 201,918 people, or 34.4%, have received the second dose. The 5 most vaccinated areas are Mba, Rewa, Nanranga and Naitasiri, which have achieved 100% first dose. Next is Nandi, and Kandavu has vaccinated around 80% of its people. And Mos Mbokini from Lotoka is fully vaccinated. Have you received 2 jabs yet? Up ahead, ANZMAT team focuses on mitigating effects of COVID-19. And Fijians along the Coral Coast on high alert. Welcome back. The Australia and New Zealand medical assistance team believes Fiji's worst case scenario would have been more deaths and a strained public health care system. With 315 COVID deaths since the second outbreak began, ANZMAT Charlie team leader Bronte Martin says quick mitigation efforts have saved Fiji more trouble. Apanisa Wangai reports the team continues to assist the Ministry of Health.
The ANZMAT team says Fiji's public health care system is stressed. However, timely reaction has saved more Fijian lives.
And that includes the containment zones, great levels of vaccination that we're seeing from the Fijian community, which is all protective and reduces the likelihood and the scale of the burden that then impacts the hospitals.
As the number of COVID-19 cases recorded in the Western Division surges, Martin says they are now applying what they've learned from months of combating the virus.
The good news is we have very high rates of vaccination in the Western Division, and we see that that will be very protective towards the population in terms of the severity and the scale of illness. But it's still very important that everybody who is able to be vaccinated, please does get vaccinated.
Currently, our surveillance teams are rapidly analyzing various data sources to help us build a clearer picture of the current transmission in these 2 divisions. However, we do know that the risk of exposure to the virus in both the Central and the Western Divisions remains extremely high.
The Delta variant remains the most highly transmissible of the COVID-19 virus. Martin says the transition to some normality will be dependent on the vaccination rate. Apenisong Grandovo, FBC News.
Villages along the Coral Coast are on high alert following COVID-safe practices should the containment border in the Central Division be lifted. Patukarasa village headman Ifiremi Navovo says most roadside vendors in the area will be exposed if borders are opened. However, they have been reminded to continue practicing good hygiene and to avoid the risk of contracting the virus. Details with Josiah Nanunga.
Patukarasa village in Nanranga is a honeypot for most commuters who travel along the Queen's Highway for boiled corn. The scenario might change should the Wainandoi border be lifted.
The roadside sellers are strictly following COVID safe protocols. I always remind them daily to be extra careful when dealing with customers.
The Rokotu in Nanranga is upping the ante, reminding village heads in the province to maintain their community restrictions, even though most of the targeted population in the area are vaccinated.
We again request Turan, Koro and Matinitikina. We have been given our guidelines in regards to this, and we hope that our villages are notified on the laws.
Any adjustment to this containment zone will depend on the number of vaccines provided to our communities, in addition to vaccination coverage for specific locations.
Health Ministry's Permanent Secretary Dr. James Fong says as cases continue to increase in the West, the ministry will strategically review its current restrictions for the benefit of Fijians in Vitilevu. Josiah Nanunga, FBC News.
The Ministry of Health says COVID-19 patients being declared dead on arrival at hospitals is a troubling trend they've noticed. Permanent Secretary for Health Dr. James Fong says it's upsetting and something that can be avoided if people report their symptoms early. Sanya Nimboila reports.
The Permanent Secretary says they have established a hotline
to detect cases of severe disease.
We have teams ready to deploy and transport patients to hospital. Please keep an eye on your loved ones, particularly if they're older or have an underlying health condition.
The Health Ministry has also strengthened its home isolation admission and discharge protocol.
We want to inform all the residents of the Laminosori containment zone that if you have been in home isolation prior to the 27th of July 2021 and you don't have any symptoms of COVID-19, you can end your period of home isolation from today, Wednesday, 11th August 2021. If you still have symptoms of COVID-19, please present yourself to your nearest screening clinic or health facility for further assessment advice. You can also call 158 for further advice.
Now, I know some of you are thinking that it's my choice to not get vaccinated. How does my choice affect everybody else? That's my decision. Well, it affects everybody else because the more people we have unvaccinated in the population, the worse the impact on our health system.
Dr. Fong says the ministry's priority in vaccinating the most vulnerable subgroups, such as people older than 60, pregnant women, people with comorbidities, and other vulnerable groups as quickly as possible still remains. Sainian Imboila, FBC News.
Former opposition leader Sitiveni Rambuka has this morning applied to register a new party. Registrar of Political Parties Muhammad Saneem confirms the application to register the proposed People's Alliance has been submitted to his office. Saneem says in accordance with the Political Parties Registration, Conduct and Funding Disclosures Act, the registrar will now process the application. Under the Act, any application to register a new party must be accompanied by the names of 5,000 members of the proposed party. There is a period of objection to the application. Following this, if the registrar finds that all requirements have been met and the objection has been dealt with, the party may be registered. Some market vendors are trying to beat the system and producing fake vaccination cards to gain entry into municipal markets. Local Government Minister Premila Kumar says these vendors have been warned and advised of the consequences. Kumar says there's been remarkable progress with a 74% vaccination rate among vendors this week compared to 67% last week. The minister adds since the recent announcement of the No Jab, No Job policy, 3,829 market vendors have taken the first dose and about 21% have taken the second. Kumar adds the ministry is concerned about some markets where vendors have not taken their jabs despite extensive awareness. And later in sports, boxers urged to seek government assistance.
Permanent Secretary for Commerce Shaheen Ali has called for support from approval agencies to streamline and fast-track investment approvals. However, he says this must be done without compromising laws. Ali highlighted that there were approximately 90 projects valued at $1.8 billion ready to be materialized. He says the investments are critically important now as Fiji is trying to shape economic recovery. The Permanent Secretary says if the Investment Facilitation Committee is able to unlock these investment projects, then they will be able to change the economic landscape of Fiji. Please Global Limited has recorded a net profit after tax of $318,891 in 6 months ending June 30th. The bottles of Vay Natural Artesian Water and AquaSafe Natural Artesian Water say this is a 4% growth in this half year compared to the first 6 months of 2020. Managing Director Warwick Please says the company remains like much of the business world in a state of uncertainty and difficulty while focusing on looking after their customers and people. Please adds the management and board remain optimistic about the remainder of the year and expect company performance to improve further as Fiji emerges from this breakout and has vaccinations and immunity increases at the current rapid pace. Here are the local exchange rates as set early this morning. The Fiji dollar slipped against our two major trading partners, the Aussie and Kiwi dollars, but rose against the other international currencies we cover. Prices were rising on the commodities market. Crude oil rose to over $69 a barrel. Gold rose to $1,751 per ounce, and silver was up at $23.45 per ounce. And we now join Sharon from HFC Bank to give us the latest figures from the money market.
Good evening. The US dollar fell after their inflation data showed consumer price increases eased in July. The annual figure was confirmed at 5.4%, even though the core number was downwardly revised to 4.3%. Perhaps a first sign that inflation may be peaking in the US, taking some pressure off the Federal Reserve to begin unwinding any stimulus anytime soon. The Wall Street got a boost from US inflation headlines, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 reaching fresh record highs. The Nasdaq Composite, however, was unable to follow the lead and closed again in red. In Europe, investor sentiment has weakened, with a survey showing a third straight month of decline in Germany as rising global COVID-19 cases keep markets on the edge. Meanwhile, commodity-linked currencies advanced, but within familiar levels. The Aussie and Kiwi dollar, which is both seen as riskier currencies, rose after the US inflation report. It was last up 0.33% and 0.5% respectively. And that's all from your HFC Bank for now. Thank you.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry of Youth and Sports has recorded a high interest of young people forming youth groups. This was highlighted by Praveen Bala while officiating at the celebration of International Youth Day in Ba this morning. Felipe Naikaso has more.
A lot of young people have now turned to farming in order to make ends meet, and this is where the Ministry of Youth and Sports has come in and assisted these clubs.
We have reached out to our youth clubs by providing them with farming materials for them to become productive contributors to the national food security. It has also meant that more of our youths, instead of being aimless without any prospect in our urban areas, are returning to the land.
The ministry has so far assisted 147 youth clubs consisting of 4,243 beneficiaries in the last financial year, and today in Ba, 30 more youth clubs were provided with assistance.
Our members started with the initiative to do something to generate income and then support the needy. So it will be very helpful to us and for the other people that we don't depend on the donors.
This is an important initiative and one that has produced results. The end game should be that we need more youth to tend to the land.
In the hopes of also generating interest in human health, a TikTok poetry competition was launched today for all registered youth clubs. Felipe Naikaso, FBC News.
And that is the latest from my end, but coming up after the break, Shamir explores other avenue to earn an income. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Climate change could wipe entire communities off the map by the end of the century if it's not halted. Between rising sea levels and increasing uncommon floods, experts say we need to act now. This report from TVNZ. The pandemic has left many young Fijians unemployed. But one man in Bua has braved the storm and set up his own barber shop in what some would say is the middle of nowhere. Eleanor Turangaiviu caught up with this inspiring Fijian at his new establishment in the remote plains of Tambua province.
Situated just several meters from the main Riketi-Nambowalu highway stands this lone barbershop at Lekutu in Bua, run by 20-year-old Mohammed Shamir.
He decided me to cut here because there's no barber shop from Nambowalu right through Senganga.
Shamir started haircutting after leaving school, working at several barbershops in Lambasa, but due to the pandemic, it became harder to pay rent.
I tell him to come and open one barbershop here and just try how it goes. And also we think about the people around here. There's no barbershop around here.
It took only several days to build this small barbershop, but since its opening on the 1st of this month, Shamir has been getting a good number of customers.
Today I got around 10 or 11 heads.
The youngest of 3 siblings, Shamir has the support of his family behind him, and Dad Mohammed Shakur has this advice for young Fijians.
They want to depend on the urban areas and go and pay the rent there. If they find it difficulty, they can come back to their own village and open like this. They can open like this and start their business and money.
Shamir believes that during this pandemic, young unemployed Fijians need to be innovative in order to get a decent income. Eleanor Turangai View, FBC News.
Communities across Fiji can now access funding under the Job for Nature program, which promotes biodiversity. Permanent Secretary for Environment Joshua Wycliffe says the rate of extinction of species is alarming worldwide, and Fiji is no exception. Wycliffe says this is why $4 million has been set aside for the program to ensure that protecting and reversing biodiversity loss remains a priority for the ministry.
We're trying to increase it from 1,000 to at least double the amount if we can this year, for them to be able to identify an area within the community where they can enrich their biodiversity or reverse biodiversity loss. Come up with just a one-pager and we will allocate the money. We will take a baseline information as to what, it's just to have a before and after scenario.
Time for sports now with Jamie.
Thank you and good evening in sports tonight. Fijiana win a major boost for women's rugby. And best ever outing for Team Fiji. This and more coming up. While women's rugby in the country has long struggled to get the attention it deserved in the past, that took a huge U-turn at the 2020 Olympics. The Fijiana's bronze medal finish and outstanding performances against higher-ranked teams in Tokyo has had a positive impact on the perception of women's rugby in Fiji. So much so, the Fijiana have also had to get used to the extra attention. Aquila Dama has more.
The Fijiana are not used to getting some positive attention, especially after a tournament, but that was not the case when they returned last night.
Now they are new to that celebration mood, the reception they have been receiving for the past few days, because it's always negative in the past, and also it depends on the results.
Changing mindsets take time, but the team put a lot of effort in making sure they do the talking on the field.
What we have emphasized as a management is that the only way we can convert the receptive from the public and also from the supporters is that we train hard.
For me, representing the country, being the flag bearer and closing ceremony, representing the Oceania throughout the Olympics, for me it was an honor, proud moment for me.
The Fijiana may have won bronze at the Olympics, but their performance won the hearts of many. Aquila Dama, FBC Sports.
Team Fiji's Tokyo Olympics outing has been hailed a success. Despite the challenges brought about by COVID-19 in the last 2 years, Team Fiji athletes persevered through the hardships, reflecting their determination with exceptional performances in Tokyo. Tailema Terukula has more.
Team Fiji arrived at 7:30 last night with a clear sense of accomplishment expressed in the faces of athletes and officials.
What a great success it has been, in that all of us have maintained our spirit and haven't come back home with those who are seriously sick or it affected them that they weren't able to perform.
A successful outing, earning Fiji's best ranking yet in the history of the Olympics.
There were COVID-19 restrictions throughout which didn't allow you to do a lot of things, but it did not prevent the athletes from competing in competition, and everything was done very, very professionally and safely and securely.
The highlight from the games was the athletes' competitive spirit despite the hardships faced along the way.
We did win a bronze medal and a gold medal, which is a huge achievement, and I think that placed us equal 59th out of 206. Off the top of my head, I can't remember where we were at in Rio. But I would say that 59th would be, I'm sure it would be our best performance, yes.
The team is looking forward to completing its quarantine period with the outlook on the upcoming Commonwealth and Pacific mini-games next year. Talima Terukula, FBC Sports.
Professional boxers are being urged to access the assistance provided by government as the sport struggles to stay afloat during these difficult times. This after some boxers raised concerns on why the Boxing Commission of Fiji is not assisting them during this pandemic. Karlaini Tavi reports.
The Boxing Commission of Fiji says while they understand the boxers' concerns, they operate within the umbrella of the Ministry of Youth and Sports.
We have discussed with the ministry officials on what we can do about the pandemic. I mean, can we have access to additional funds so that we can assist with the current situation? And we've been told that government has made available various avenues for people to access assistance individually from government.
Unlike other sporting entities, boxing does not have enough funds to sustain all its boxers.
We have spoken to our stakeholders, we've spoken to clubs, we've spoken to promoters, and one or two of them are doing or taking initiative in putting in place programs that can assist these boxers.
One of the boxers who raised his concern is former welterweight champion Joseph Kwajo. Kwajo says there is a need to revive the sport in Fiji.
In 2000, why boxing is going down? Why the boxing is supposed to go up, like the way the rugby is going up or the way the soccer is going up?
The commission has been allocated $30,000 for the new financial year, and they have to prepare acquittals before accessing funds for the next quarter. Karleni Tavi, FBC Sports.
Being away from family who live across the globe for more than a year has not been easy for national football coach Flemming Seretslev. The Danish national signed a 3-year contract with Fiji Football early last year and has been working closely with the national side since before the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic hit the country. Venina Rakautonga with this report.
Coping through the lockdown has been difficult for the national coach.
It has been a bit tough when when you're alone, and especially in a period like this where you can't go out to sit on a cafe, you can't go out to a restaurant, have your dinner. Yeah, but most of all, it's not so much about this, but it's the human relations, so to say.
Seretslev is urging Fijians to get vaccinated so the country can return to some form of normalcy.
To be vaccinated, it's actually the only way we can get through this pandemic, and I hope everyone who is maybe doubting will consider once again to take care not only of themselves but taking care of their relatives, their friends.
FIGIFA Chief Executive Mohammed Yusuf says although there hasn't been much international competitions, they still need the services of Seretslev.
January, the World Cup qualifiers, so we will definitely need that coach to prepare our national teams.
Seretslev currently operates from the FIGIFA Academy in Ba, awaiting confirmation from Health Ministry on national team camp. Venina Rakautonga, FBC Sports.
Football star Lionel Messi says he's in the right place to win another Champions League trophy with Neymar at his new club, Paris Saint-Germain. That's it from Sports Tonight. Coming up in Weird and Wonderful, younger generation a new target for scammers. Find out more after the break.
A trough of low pressure lies just to the north of Fiji and is expected to affect the group until later tonight as a high pressure system to the south of Fiji directs fresh to strong southeast winds over the country. To the west, cloudy with brief showers today. Eastwards from Pacific Harbour to Suva, occasional rain, isolated heavy falls expected, rain easing to showers later tonight. In the north, occasional rain was experienced as well. Locations we are checking out today are Suva, Nadi and Mba. Lambasa had the highest humidity at 88%. At sea, southeast winds 20 to 30 knots, gusting to 35 knots. Rough to very rough seas, moderate southerly swells. Turning to the tides, the next low tide is at 3:38 tomorrow morning, with high tide at 9:43 a.m. Sunrise is at 6:27. For tomorrow, occasional rain over the eastern parts and interior of Viti Levu, Lau and Lomai Viti Group, Vanua Levu, Taviuni and nearby smaller islands. Isolated heavy falls expected. The outlook for Saturday, cloudy with some showers over the interior and eastern parts of the main islands. Our shot of the day, this picturesque scene was sent in once again by our northern reporter, Eleanor Turangaiviu. In Fijian Pulse, we ask, what do you think about the review of the containment borders?
Everyone will need to get vaccinated in order for the borders to open and people who are stuck can return home.
I would like to thank the government for their initiative to get 80% of Fiji's population vaccinated. Once we reach the target, I can return home and see my family who are in Ovalau.
It has been months since I last saw my family, and I think it's about time the borders are lifted and I return home.
I think the main thing is for people to get vaccinated.
And recapping our main stories, Deputy Commissioner of Police tenders resignation. Ministry clarifies what constitutes being fully vaccinated, and new COVID variants discovered around the world. To our poll question, this week we are asking, should more be done for women's rugby in Fiji? Visit our FBC News website to answer and send us newsworthy pictures and videos, fbcnews@fbc.com.fj, or share it with us via our social media accounts. You can also download our FBC app to keep updated with the very latest in news and sports, and listen to our 6 radio stations live. That's your news this evening. I'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Modemanda.